My roommate said her family would stay just a week, but they stayed 3 months and took over my apartment. So I invited my own loud, messy family to handle them. My roommate, Iris, claimed her parents and 2 brothers needed a place while their house was being fumigated, promising it would only be 7 days. But 3 months later, they're still here. What would you do if your own home, your sanctuary, was suddenly invaded, not by strangers, but by your roommate's entire family? And then she dared to call you selfish for wanting your life back? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And trust me, it spiraled into a nightmare I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. It all started innocently enough. My roommate, Iris, asked if her family could stay for just a week. Something about fumigation back home. I said, fine, of course, because emergencies happen, right? I wanted to be a good roommate. But that week quickly turned into a living hell. Her parents took over the living room. Her brothers slept in her room with her. Suddenly, our apartment, built for 2 people, had 6 bodies crammed inside. After that first week, I cautiously asked Iris when they were leaving. She brushed me off, saying the fumigation had uncovered additional problems, so they needed a few more days. I was beyond annoyed, but still I tried to be understanding. A few days became 2 weeks, then 3, then 4, each time with some new, increasingly unbelievable excuse. Waiting for repairs, insurance issues, contractor delays. By February, it was like her family had completely annexed the apartment. They acted like they owned the place. Her mother, Grace, rearranged my kitchen, even throwing out my spices, claiming they were expired, even though they weren't. Her father, Melvin, sat around in his underwear all day, parked on our couch, watching TV at full volume while supposedly working from home. And the brothers, Sebastian and Bruno, they ate all my food from the fridge and used my bathroom products without a second thought. I was fuming. When I finally confronted Iris about it, she just stared at me, completely deadpan. "You're being unwelcoming," she said, her voice dripping with accusation. "They're going through a hard time. You have no idea what it's like to have family in need. You should be more compassionate." Compassionate? My jaw practically hit the floor. I reminded her, very calmly, that we split the rent 50-50 for a 2-bedroom apartment, not a homeless shelter for her relatives. She just shrugged. "It's temporary. You need to stop being selfish about space you're not even using during the day while you're at work." Can you believe the audacity? Her family started treating me like I was the intruder in my own home. Grace would tell me I was cooking wrong in my own kitchen, then just take over making dinner. Melvin would change the channel when I was watching something, declaring, "Renters don't get priority over guests." And the brothers? Oh, the brothers. They'd bring their friends over without asking and party in our living room until 3 a.m. on weeknights. Every single time I complained to Iris, she'd just sigh. "My family is trying to feel comfortable during a stressful time, and you're making it worse." My blood boiled. Then, in March, the truth finally, brutally spilled out. Her brother, Sebastian, let it slip. Their house had been foreclosed on months ago. There was never any fumigation, never any repairs needed. It was just a family who lost their home and decided mine would conveniently do. Iris admitted she'd lied. She looked at me with those big, innocent eyes and said, "Well, you wouldn't have let them stay if you'd known the truth, would you?" She swore they were looking for a new place but needed more time, and I couldn't possibly kick out a homeless family. My mind raced. Homeless? My apartment was not their solution. I gave them 2 weeks. 2 weeks to leave, or I'd involve the landlord. Iris actually laughed. She said they were tenants now, after living there for 2 months, and that I'd have to formally evict them, which would take months. She'd even looked up the law, she said. I couldn't just throw them out. And that's when they got bolder. Knowing I couldn't easily remove them, Grace started redecorating with her own furniture she'd pulled out of storage. Melvin set up a whole office in the living room corner. The brothers moved their gaming systems in and completely monopolized the TV. They stopped pretending it was temporary. They even started receiving mail at our address. My blood ran cold. This was it. This was war. I decided right then and there. I was going to make their stay so utterly miserable that they'd beg to leave. Voluntarily. First move? I cut off the wireless internet. It was in my name and I paid for it. When they all descended on me, complaining bitterly, I just shrugged. Internet isn't included in your non-existent rental agreement. Melvin couldn't work from home anymore. He had to go to coffee shops. Sebastian and Bruno threw childish tantrums because they couldn't game online. Iris practically begged me to turn it back on. My answer was firm. Guests don't get internet privileges after overstaying their welcome. Next, I methodically removed everything I owned from the common areas. My television, my streaming device, my gaming console, my kitchen appliances, my pots and pans, my dishes, my furniture. Everything. The living room became a barren wasteland of their belongings. Then came the noise. Oh, the noise. I started playing music in my room at all hours. Death metal at 6 a.m., techno at midnight, country music on repeat while I was at work. When they complained, I simply reminded them about their late-night parties. Just trying to feel comfortable in my stressful living situation, I said, a sweet smile on my face. And the money? I presented Iris with a meticulously calculated bill for 3 months of utilities, for 5 extra people. When she refused to pay, I had the utilities transferred into her name. Suddenly, she was on the hook for hundreds in deposits and past due amounts. The tables were turning. But the real turning point? That came when I invited my own family to visit for a week. My parents, my sister, her husband, and their 3 kids. All of them. I told Iris my family needed the living room, so hers would have to share her bedroom. She spluttered. That's impossible. I just smiled. You made it work before. You can do it again. And then the invasion. My family was loud. My family was messy. My family was constantly in the way, just like hers had been. My parents walked in first, suitcases and sleeping bags in tow. My mom, a force of nature, headed straight for the kitchen. Grace's eyes went wide. Mom started opening cabinets, moving things around, pulling out Grace's carefully organized spice rack. My dad, without a word, dropped his bag on the couch right in Melvin's usual spot and sat down like he owned it. Melvin, for once wearing actual pants, had to scoot over looking bewildered. Ellen, my sister, arrived next with her husband and 3 kids. Kira and Sydney immediately started pulling out toys, scattering them across the living room floor. Grace and Melvin watched from their corner, pure horror etched on their faces as more and more people filled our tiny space. My mom, still in the kitchen, found Grace's spice collection and started picking through it, holding bottles up to the light. Sebastian and Bruno, drawn by the commotion, emerged from Iris's bedroom, stopping dead when they saw my entire family taking over. My dad cranked up the TV to watch sports, and Melvin flinched. Ellen's kids, full of boundless energy, were screaming and playing, toys everywhere. Iris grabbed my arm, yanking me into the hallway outside the apartment. Her face was bright red, her voice shaking with barely suppressed fury. "This is completely unacceptable," she hissed. "You can't just invite people to live here without asking me first." I met her gaze, my own smile sweet and deliberate. "Oh, really? Because you did exactly that 3 months ago when you brought your entire family to stay." "That was different," she spat. "It was an emergency. And my family needs a place to stay for a week," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Just like yours did." She practically shrieked. "There isn't room for all these people. Someone's going to get hurt with kids running everywhere." "You made it work with 6 people," I countered, the words tasting like victory. "We can make it work with 11 now." "You're being petty and childish." "I'm being a good family member," I replied, mimicking her earlier words. "Just like you were." She tried to argue that her family had nowhere else to go, and mine probably had perfectly good homes. I reminded her, pointedly, that she'd lied about that. Her family never had an emergency in the first place. She looked like she wanted to explode, but had no good retort. She just stormed back inside. That first night was absolute chaos. 11 people trying to exist in a space meant for two. The single bathroom was a war zone. Kira, my niece, started crying around 8 p.m., tired and uncomfortable sleeping on the floor. Sydney joined in a few minutes later. Sebastian and Bruno couldn't even reach their gaming systems through the pile of my family stuff. Ellen's husband tried to set up a sleeping area, constantly bumping into Grace and Melvin's things. My dad snored loudly on the couch by 9 p.m., the sound echoing through the apartment. Iris's brothers looked utterly miserable. Grace tried to organize her corner, but my mom's bags were everywhere. Nobody could watch TV because my dad had claimed it and fallen asleep with it blasting. Melvin retreated to Iris's bedroom, followed shortly by Sebastian and Bruno. I could hear their muffled complaints about the invasion. The next morning, Grace emerged to make breakfast, only to find my mom already in the kitchen. My mom, having a grand old time, had pulled everything out of the cabinets and was reorganizing them her way, moving Grace's pots, rearranging her spices. Grace asked what she was doing. My mom, completely unfazed, said, "Oh, just making myself comfortable while I stay here." She picked up Grace's cumin. "This looks expired," she declared, even though the date was perfectly fine. Grace's face turned scarlet. "Those spices are perfectly good. I just bought most of them." My mom, without missing a beat, tossed the cumin in the trash. Better safe than sorry when it comes to food safety. I watched from the doorway. Grace was experiencing the exact same frustration I'd felt months ago when she'd done this to my kitchen. My mom found Grace's paprika next. Grace tried to snatch it back, but my mom moved it out of reach. "I'll cook breakfast for everyone," Mom announced, since I'm already in the kitchen anyway. Grace, horrified, said it was her kitchen and she'd planned to make food. My mom just waved her off. "Too many people now for you to cook for everyone. I'll handle it." Grace looked at me, pleading, but I just shrugged and went to get coffee. Melvin tried to work from home at the small dining table. My dad and Ellen's husband immediately sat down next to him, launching into a loud discussion about last night's game. Melvin tried to ignore them, headphones on, but their voices cut right through. He finally politely asked them to keep it down. My dad looked at him. "Guests don't get to dictate noise levels in someone else's home," he boomed. Melvin retorted that he wasn't a guest. He'd lived here for months. My dad just scoffed. "That doesn't give you any special rights." Melvin gave up, packed his laptop, and muttered something about finding a coffee shop. Grace watched him go, a worried expression on her face. Day 2 was somehow worse. Everyone was tired and cranky. Iris's family tried to escape to other rooms, but my family had sprawled everywhere. Sebastian couldn't game. Ellen's kids were playing with toys on his spot. Bruno couldn't watch TV. My dad was already there. Grace couldn't cook. My mom still occupied the kitchen. Melvin came back from the coffee shop looking utterly defeated. Sebastian and Bruno looked like death warmed over. Dark circles under their eyes from sleeping crammed together in Iris's room. Iris herself looked like she hadn't slept at all. My parents, though, perfectly comfortable, like they planned to stay forever. The apartment smelled of too many people. Everyone was getting on everyone's nerves. I found my mom in the hallway, pulling her aside. I thanked her, explaining that this exact chaos had been my life for 3 months. My mom hugged me tight. "No daughter of mine is going to be pushed around in her own home," she declared. "We'll stay as long as you need us to make your point." I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. Finally, someone understood. My mom said Iris's family had taken advantage of my kindness, and it was time they learned some boundaries. She asked if I was okay. I admitted it had been incredibly hard, but seeing Iris's family experience their own medicine, it made me feel a little better. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, my mom said, squeezing my hand. Let me know if you need anything else. I felt less alone than I had in months. That afternoon, Iris cornered me in my bedroom, desperation etched on her face, mascara streaks running down her cheeks. She was crying. She said her family would start paying for utilities, buying their own food, anything if I just made my family leave. I looked at her cold. We're way past the point of negotiations about utilities and groceries, Iris. She stammered. I'm trying to compromise, to find a solution. I asked her, very deliberately, when her family planned to move out permanently, like they should have done months ago. She mumbled about still looking. How hard it was to find something affordable. 3 months was plenty of time, I said, my voice flat. And clearly they weren't trying hard enough. She launched into how tough the housing market was. I cut her off. That's not my problem. You lied about why they needed to stay in the first place. She dissolved into full-blown sobs, calling me cruel, uncaring. I countered that she was being manipulative, using her family struggle to guilt me after months of taking advantage. What will it take for you to make your family leave? She choked out. Nothing, I told her. Short of your entire family moving out immediately will make me send mine home. Just then, my phone rang. It was the landlord. I took a deep breath and decided to tell him everything. I explained Iris had invited her family for a week, 3 months ago, and they never left. He asked how many people were living in the 2-bedroom apartment. 6, I said, until recently when I invited my own family to stay. He was quiet for a long moment. That's way over the occupancy limits in the lease agreement. I know, I said. I've been trying to get them to leave for months. He asked why I hadn't told him sooner. I was trying to handle it myself, I admitted. He appreciated my honesty now, but warned me this was a serious violation that could get us both evicted. I explained the foreclosure lie. He said it didn't matter. The lease was clear. He'd send a formal notice. The next day, it was there, a notice taped to our door. Iris ripped it down, her face going pale as she read it. 7 days. Her family had 7 days to leave or face eviction. She ran to me, shoving the paper in my face. Did you tell the landlord? Yes, I said. He asked directly. I wasn't going to lie for you. You ruined everything, she screamed. Now my family will be homeless. Your family was never supposed to be here in the first place, I told her, my voice unwavering. You created this mess yourself. She begged me to call the landlord, to say it was a misunderstanding. Absolutely not, I said. It wasn't a misunderstanding. She cried harder, saying 7 days wasn't enough time. I reminded her she'd had 3 months. You're heartless, she wailed. I care about my own home and my own peace more than I care about people who took advantage of me, I stated plainly. Your family made my life hell. Now they can deal with mine making theirs just as bad. She stormed off to her room, where her entire family was crammed like sardines. That night was pure chaos. 11 people fighting over 1 bathroom, trying to find sleep space. My nieces cried because the floor was hard, and honestly, a tiny part of me felt bad, until I remembered Iris's brothers partying until 3 a.m. for weeks. The next morning, Grace and my mom converged on the kitchen simultaneously. My mom got there first, pulling out ingredients. Grace stood there, arms crossed, fuming. Grace moved my mom's eggs aside, put her own pan on the stove. My mom moved it right back. They kept shifting each other's stuff, not a word exchanged. Just cold stares that could freeze water. My mom ended up making a massive breakfast spread. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, hash browns. The kitchen filled with amazing smells. My family descended on it like locusts, devouring every bite. Iris's family sat in the living room corner, watching with hungry eyes. Grace had only managed to make toast before my mom took over. Now, there was nothing left for her family to eat. I felt a tiny pang of guilt, seeing them sit there with empty stomachs. But then I remembered all the times they'd eaten my groceries without asking. The guilt evaporated. Later, my dad made a pointed comment about how inappropriate it was to walk around in underwear when children were present. Melvin, for the first time in ages, put on actual pants. A small victory, but it felt amazing. Sebastian and Bruno tried to befriend my brother-in-law, talking sports and video games, hoping for some male alliance. He gave them short answers, always walking away. He was loyal to me. The apartment had become 2 hostile camps, crammed into impossible quarters. My nieces ran around, screaming, making it impossible to relax. They knocked over a cup, stepped on a phone charger. Sebastian looked like he was about to lose his mind, unable to game in peace. I felt zero sympathy, remembering all his late-night parties. On day 3 of this madness, Iris came to my room, tears streaming, mascara running. She admitted her family had nowhere to go, no money saved for deposits. She begged for mercy. What could she do to fix this? I told her the only acceptable solution was for her family to leave permanently. I'd give them 2 weeks to find somewhere if they started apartment hunting immediately and followed strict rules until then. She agreed, desperately, crying harder, knowing the landlord's 7-day deadline was even worse than my offer. My family packed up after their planned week. As they loaded suitcases and sleeping bags into cars, Iris's family watched from the windows. My mom pulled me aside. "Are you really okay dealing with this for 2 more weeks?" I assured her I could handle it. Now there was an end date, real consequences. With my family gone, the apartment felt slightly less insane, but still too crowded. I laid out strict rules for Iris's family. Quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Stay out of my room and my things, replace any food they ate, and show me proof they were apartment hunting every single day. Grace approached me later, apologizing stiffly for rearranging my kitchen months ago. She'd clearly just experienced the exact same violation. I accepted her apology, but kept my tone coldly polite and distant. We weren't friends. Melvin started spending entire days at coffee shops or the library. Iris's brothers were gone most of the time, crashing with friends. The apartment was finally more bearable. Iris came to my room one day, laptop in hand, apartment listings on the screen. She sat on my bed, scrolling through pages of rejections. Most places wanted first, last, and security deposit. Over $4,000 they didn't have. No pets, no kids, no more than 2 occupants. Landlords rejected them for lack of rental history or bad credit. I watched her face tighten with each click. A studio an hour outside the city. $1,800. A basement room with no windows. 3 months rent up front. The reality of how hard it was to find housing when you were desperate started to sink in for all of us. Iris closed the laptop. Her parents had applied to 20 places, got 2 rejections. I felt a weird mix of satisfaction that my plan was working and an uncomfortable awareness that I was watching people struggle with actual homelessness. Grace was calling numbers all morning, her voice getting more strained. Melvin looked at rooms for rent in people's houses. Even those wanted deposits they didn't have. 3 days later, I met my lawyer friend for coffee. She ordered a latte, pulled out a notebook, and listened patiently as I explained everything, from January to now. The lease violations, the eviction notice, Iris's claim of tenant rights. My friend nodded. The law's complicated, but Iris is partly right. You can't just throw people out after they've lived somewhere that long. But the landlord's eviction notice gave me serious leverage. She said I could sue Iris in small claims court for my portion of increased utilities, plus compensation for the lease violation and stress. It wouldn't get me much money, but it would create legal pressure. Eviction proceedings, she warned, could take months and cost money. Convincing them to leave voluntarily was still the fastest solution, and my tactics seemed to be working. I paid for our drinks, feeling more confident. That evening, I found Iris in the kitchen. Casually, I mentioned I'd talked to a lawyer about suing her for the utility costs and lease violation. The wooden spoon she was holding clattered into the sink, sauce splattering. Her face went completely white. She grabbed the counter, like she needed it to stay standing. I kept my voice calm, explaining my lawyer friend said I had a good case for at least $800 in damages, maybe more for emotional distress. Iris started crying right there in the kitchen. Tears streamed down her face, her whole body shaking. She admitted she knew what she did was wrong. She'd lied, manipulated me, violated our lease. She felt trapped when her parents lost their house. She panicked. The words came out between sobs. How she didn't know what else to do. How her family would have been literally homeless. She thought if she just bought them time, they'd figure something out. A flicker of sympathy, yes. But then I reminded myself. She chose to lie from the very start. She could have been honest. We could have made a real plan together. Instead, she trapped me with deception and let her family take over my home. I told her the lawsuit was still on the table, depending on how cooperative everyone was about leaving. Then I walked away while she cried into her hands. 2 days later, the landlord showed up for a surprise inspection. He knocked at 10 a.m. I let him in, watching his face change as he walked through the apartment. He pulled out his phone, taking photos. Crowded living room, sleeping bags, suitcases, too much food in the kitchen, toiletries overflowing the bathroom. Grace and Melvin stood awkwardly as he documented everything, making notes. He counted the people present, asked who was on the lease, photographed Melvin's makeshift office. When he finished, he pulled me aside. He wouldn't be renewing Iris's lease when it expired in 3 months. Too many problems. He offered me first choice to stay, with a new roommate he'd help me find. Or I could move to a different unit for a fresh start. I sat there thinking. The walls felt tainted by months of conflict. I didn't want to live in a space that would constantly remind me of this mess. I told him I wanted a different unit, preferably a 1-bedroom. I wanted to live alone, never deal with roommate drama again. He showed me 2 options. The rent would be higher, but the peace? Worth every extra dollar. The landlord said he'd start the formal eviction process if Iris's family wasn't gone by the deadline. He'd be checking regularly. This inspection felt like pure validation. What Iris did was wrong. The very next evening, Grace and Melvin called everyone into the living room for an announcement. They'd found a room to rent an hour away in a cheaper area. Not ideal. 1 bedroom for both of them, shared bathroom, shared kitchen. But they could afford it. The landlord only wanted first month's rent and a small deposit. He was willing to overlook their situation. Relief washed over everyone's faces. They'd be moving out in 3 days. Iris looked like she might cry from sheer gratitude. Sebastian and Bruno actually smiled. Even I felt the tension in my shoulders release. This nightmare had an end date. Grace started making lists, packing. I watched her, noticing how worn and tired she looked. Her hands shook as she folded clothes, deep lines on her face. Despite everything, I recognized they were a family struggling with real hardship, even if they'd handled it terribly. Losing your home, scrambling to find housing while maintaining jobs and dignity, it would break anyone down. Grace caught me watching and gave me a small, sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. She apologized for how things went, said she understood why I was angry. I nodded but didn't say much back, still too hurt to offer real forgiveness. The furniture she'd brought looked shabby, worn, cheap. I realized they hadn't taken over my apartment because they were entitled or cruel, but because they were desperate and scared. On moving day, Melvin came to find me before they loaded the last boxes. He stuck out his hand. I shook it, confused. He apologized for making me uncomfortable, for sitting around in his underwear, for taking over my living room, for not respecting my space. It was the first direct acknowledgement from anyone in Iris's family that they'd crossed serious boundaries. His voice was quiet, genuinely ashamed. He said they'd been so focused on their own crisis, they hadn't thought about what they were doing to me. that it wasn't fair or right. I accepted his apology. "I hope your new place works out," I said, meaning it more than I expected to. He nodded and went to help Grace. Within 2 hours, they were gone. The living room was suddenly empty, quiet, almost strange. Sebastian and Bruno moved back to sleeping there temporarily, still looking for their own places. The apartment felt almost normal with just 4 people. We could use the bathroom without waiting. The kitchen wasn't constantly crowded. The TV was available, but tension still hung heavy in the air. Sebastian spent his time looking at roommate ads. Bruno was gone all day, working and apartment hunting. Iris barely spoke, retreating to her room. I started cooking my own meals again, watching shows in the living room, reclaiming small pieces of my life. The apartment felt bigger, but also sadder, like we were living in the ruins of something destroyed. A week after her parents left, Iris asked if we could talk. We sat in the living room after her brothers went to bed. It was the longest, most difficult conversation we'd ever had. She admitted she should have been honest from the start. She should have asked, not lied. She said she panicked, made terrible choices because she couldn't bear the thought of her family being homeless. But she knew it didn't excuse what she did. I told her the betrayal of trust was what hurt most, more than the inconvenience. We'd been decent roommates. She threw that away by lying for months. She could have come to me honestly. We could have figured out a solution together, helped her family find resources, given them a few weeks with clear boundaries. Instead, she manipulated me and let her family treat me like garbage in my own home. Iris cried, said she understood if I never forgave her, that she'd ruined our friendship and living situation. I said I didn't know about forgiveness yet, but I appreciated her finally being honest. We sat in silence. It felt incomplete but necessary. A week later, Sebastian announced he'd found a place with friends. 3 bedrooms. He'd known them from college. He started packing his gaming setup immediately. The living room dismantled, piece by piece. Iris helped him carry stuff to his car. They both looked relieved. 2 days after that, Bruno said he was moving in with his girlfriend's family temporarily. He packed quickly, left with barely a goodbye. The apartment was suddenly just Iris and me again, like January before any of this started. But everything was different, broken. We passed each other like polite strangers. Her eyes down, mine too. The apartment felt bigger, yes, but emptier. My chest felt tight. We used to coexist, split chores, watch shows. That was gone. The trust we'd built, shattered into pieces too small to put back together. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, going through bank statements and utility bills from the past 3 months. Every higher charge I added to my spreadsheet. Electric bill nearly doubled. Water up 40%. Extra $200 for groceries. I calculated the internet cost too. Total, $830 of extra costs I'd covered while her family freeloaded. I printed it, highlighted every charge, and walked to Iris's bedroom door. She opened it. Her face went pale seeing the papers. I handed her the itemized bill. She read it, not arguing, just nodding. She asked if I'd accept payments over time. We agreed. $200 per month for 4 months. She promised the first payment for next month. 5 minutes. Then we retreated to our separate spaces. A few days later, the landlord called. He told me he wouldn't be renewing Iris's portion of the lease. The overcrowding and utility issues were too much. He reiterated his offer: stay with a new roommate or move to a different unit. I thought about it. The walls felt like they were screaming memories. I told him I wanted a different unit, a 1-bedroom. I needed peace, my own space. He showed me options. The rent would be higher, but peace was worth every penny. Iris started disappearing for days. She'd mentioned a boyfriend. Now, she was clearly spending most nights at his place, only coming back for clothes or mail. Her bedroom door stayed closed. I'd go 2 or 3 days without seeing her. Rent still showed up on time. She'd essentially moved out, still paying. Part of me was relieved, but another part felt sad about our disintegrated living situation. We'd never be friends again, but we couldn't quite separate until the lease ended. I started reaching out to friends I'd avoided. My best friend from college came over. I told her everything. Her jaw dropped. She kept interrupting with, "How did you stay sane?" When I described my revenge tactics, the internet, utilities, my family's invasion, she started laughing so hard she nearly spit out her coffee. "I can't believe you actually did that. So petty but brilliant," she said, proud of me for standing up for myself. Talking to her helped me see how utterly abnormal it all was. I'd gotten so used to the stress, normalized it. Her shocked reactions reminded me none of it should have happened. My mom called every Sunday to check on me. She kept saying, "Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire." Desperate times, desperate measures. She thought my revenge plan was justified. I couldn't argue with the results. Her family left within 2 weeks of mine arriving. The mirror tactic had worked. She offered to help me move, which I gratefully accepted. I started browsing apartment listings, excited about living completely alone. The one-bedrooms were smaller, but the trade-off of my own space was worth it. I booked viewings. The idea of a fresh start, clear boundaries, no complicated history, made me feel lighter than I had in months. The first of the month arrived. I checked my bank account, expecting nothing. But there it was, $200 from Iris. First payment. I stared at it, genuinely surprised. She'd followed through. It didn't fix the broken trust, but it showed responsibility. I sent a brief, neutral text. 2 weeks later, I ran into Grace at the grocery store. We both froze. She approached me, quietly thanking me for giving them time instead of having the landlord force them out. She mentioned their room, her sons living with friends. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was still angry, but another part recognized their hardship. I told her I was glad they'd found something stable. We made small talk, then made excuses to leave. Walking back to my car, I felt a complicated mix of relief and lingering resentment. The apartment was peaceful now, just me, and occasional glimpses of Iris. I could watch whatever I wanted, cook without criticism, sleep without parties. But the peace also felt empty, sad. Like walking through a house after everyone's moved out, only echoes remain. The living room, where we'd fought so many battles, now just held my couch and TV. All the conflict reduced to quiet furniture and bare walls. I realized the whole experience had taken a real emotional toll. I booked a therapist. Sitting in her office felt strange, like admitting I couldn't handle my own problems. But I needed help processing everything. She asked me to walk through the situation. She pointed out patterns. I had trouble setting clear boundaries, saying no. I let Iris's family stay even after the lies. I thought I needed to be understanding, compassionate, instead of protecting my own space. People with weak boundaries often let situations escalate way too far before they finally push back, she said. And that's exactly what happened. The realization was uncomfortable. I'd let them walk all over me for months. Even then, I fought back with petty revenge, not direct confrontation. Learning to set boundaries early would prevent this, she said. I left feeling both better and worse. Relieved to understand myself. Frustrated it took 3 months of hell to figure it out. Back at the apartment, Iris and I coordinated our move, almost entirely through texts. Practical, no deep conversations. When are you scheduling movers? Do you want to split the cleaning service? Every interaction stiff, businesslike, like strangers handling a transaction. Part of me wanted a real conversation, but another knew we were too raw, the friendship too damaged. The texts kept coming, forwarding mail, splitting supplies, landlord coordination. Neither of us suggested talking in person. It felt sad and final, like watching something die slowly. I found a nice one-bedroom place, 20 minutes away. The rent was higher, $200 more, but the peace of living alone was worth every extra penny. I loved the space immediately. Big windows, my own kitchen, a bathroom I wouldn't share. Cozy bedroom, enough space for my couch. I filled out the application. 3 days later, approved. I signed the lease. Holding my copy felt like a ticket to freedom. Proof I'd have my own space where nobody could invade. The security deposit and first month's rent took a big chunk of my savings, but I didn't care. It meant escape. One evening, when Iris actually came home, we ended up ordering pizza. Accidentally. Neither of us had eaten. We sat on the couch, watching a random comedy. Not talking much, but not fighting either. For a little while, it felt almost normal. I remembered that Iris wasn't a terrible person underneath. She'd been funny, considerate, someone I'd enjoyed living with. The situation had brought out the worst in us. Her manipulative, me vengeful. Watching her laugh, I felt sad about how completely our relationship had broken down. She'd made bad choices, but I understood desperation. When the pizza was gone, we retreated to our rooms, not discussing the brief moment of normalcy. A few days later, Iris knocked on my door. She sat on my bed looking more relaxed. Her parents had found stable housing, a small apartment an hour away. Her brothers were okay too. Sebastian with roommates, Bruno with his girlfriend's family temporarily. She seemed genuinely relieved. I told her I was glad they'd found places, and I meant it. Homelessness was genuinely difficult. She thanked me quietly for giving them time. We sat in uncomfortable silence, then she left. The conversation didn't fix anything, but it felt like a small step toward acknowledging that real people, not just villains, were involved. I started packing 2 weeks before move out. Going through my room, I realized how much I'd hidden during the conflict. My good dishes, expensive shampoo, favorite snacks. I'd turned my bedroom into a storage unit, living like someone under siege. Packing it all felt both satisfying and depressing. The apartment grew bare. Iris was packing too. We moved around each other, carefully, dismantling our shared home without discussing how strange it felt. My last utility bill arrived. Finally back to normal levels. What 2 people actually cost. The difference was huge, easily an extra $100 per month I'd absorbed. Iris had been paying her half of the inflated bills lately, making good on her debt. I calculated she still owed me about $400. She'd paid $200. I trusted she'd pay the rest. I took a photo of the final bill, showing the normal amount, and texted it to Iris. This is what we should have been paying all along. She acknowledged it. The financial aspect was resolving. The landlord scheduled the final walkthrough. He arrived with a clipboard. I followed nervously. He noted scuff marks, minor wear. Nothing major, considering the chaos. In the kitchen, clean. Bathroom, normal wear and tear. Bedrooms, empty. He said he'd return most of the security deposit. I felt relieved. Iris looked grateful. He mentioned he was glad we were both moving out. The overcrowding had caused neighbor complaints. He wasn't mean, just factual. We signed the paperwork. Moving day. I woke early loading my car. Iris was doing the same. We carried boxes down the stairs in awkward silence. We'd help each other occasionally, holding doors, grabbing heavy items, but no talk beyond coordination. So much unsaid. The hurt, anger, regret. Too big for a hallway conversation. I watched her load her car. She looked tired, sad. She caught me watching, gave a small, sad smile. I returned it, exhausted, both of us ready to move on. My car filled. Before I drove away, Iris walked over, knocked on my window. I rolled it down. She leaned in, looked directly at me. "I'm sorry," she said one final time. Her voice cracked. "I understand if you never want to speak to me again." Genuine regret in her eyes. I took a deep breath. "I forgive you," I said, "but I need distance. Maybe someday we can reconnect, but not now. Not while everything still feels so raw." She nodded, thanked me, stepped back. I started the engine, pulled away, watching her get smaller in my rear view mirror, driving toward my new apartment and whatever came next. My new building was smaller, quiet. For stories, I carried the first box up, unlocked the door. The apartment was empty, clean. Hardwood floors, big windows. I stood in the living room, listening to the silence. No TV blaring, no arguing voices, no footsteps of unwanted people. The quiet felt so good it almost made me cry. I hauled boxes for hours. By evening, I had essentials unpacked. Bed first, then the kitchen, putting dishes in cabinets that were actually mine. Every item I placed felt like reclaiming something. I made dinner in my own kitchen, no criticism. Ate on my couch, watching whatever I wanted, no one changing the channel. That first night, I lay in bed, completely relaxed for the first time in months. No one was going to burst in. No one was partying. No one was eating my food. This space belonged to me and only me. 2 weeks later, my mom visited. She walked through the apartment, commenting on how nice it was, how happy I looked. We sat on my couch. She told me she was proud of how I handled everything with Iris. It felt messy, I said, especially inviting my whole family. My mom shook her head. Standing up for yourself doesn't always look pretty, but it's necessary. She reminded me Iris had lied for months. Sometimes you have to fight back hard. I knew she was right. Part of me still felt guilty. We talked about other things. Before she left, she hugged me tight. Glad you got out of that situation before it damaged you even more. I felt grateful for her support. A month into living alone, another $200 payment from Iris. Her second. On time. I stared at it. She was actually following through. It didn't erase what happened, but it showed responsibility. I transferred it to savings. Over the next few weeks, I decorated my apartment exactly how I wanted it. New curtains, pictures on the walls, furniture arranged for me. Every choice felt like reclaiming control. The apartment started feeling like home in a way my old place never did. I could walk around in pajamas all day, cook at midnight, play music as loud as I wanted. The freedom was amazing. One evening, a friend came for dinner. She looked around. Cute and cozy, she said. Then she asked, "Would you ever consider having a roommate again to save money?" I stopped eating. The financial benefits were real, but Iris's experience had left me wary. I told her honestly, I don't know. Maybe someday with the right person and very clear boundaries, but not anytime soon. The idea of someone else having a key, access to my stuff, made my stomach tight. My friend nodded. Completely understood. We changed the subject, but the question stayed with me. Was I permanently scarred? A few weeks later, I saw posts from Iris on social media, smiling in a nice apartment with her boyfriend, captions about moving in together, starting fresh. I stared at the photos, a mix of emotions. Glad she found stability. She deserved peace. But sad our friendship didn't survive. We'd been decent roommates. I missed that. I didn't comment. We needed to stay in separate lives. Maybe someday casual acquaintances. But the trust was too broken. 3 months after moving out, I was at a coffee shop near my old apartment. Someone said my name. Sebastian. We stared at each other in awkward surprise. He asked if we could talk. We sat down. He looked different, cleaner, more put together. He apologized for his behavior, said the whole experience taught his family about respecting boundaries. His parents were doing better, his brother had a job. Sebastian was saving for his own place. I listened. I wasn't angry anymore. Time had faded most of the resentment. I appreciated the apology. We talked about neutral things, then said goodbye. It was surprisingly pleasant. Around that time, my anxiety dreams stopped. No more waking in a panic, thinking I heard people in my apartment, or that Iris's family had moved in again. The psychological impact of having my space invaded was finally healing. I could come home without that knot of dread. I could relax. The peace felt almost strange. My neighbor across the hall, a teacher around my age, knocked on my door one evening with a bottle of wine. "Want company?" I invited her in. We talked for hours. Eventually, I told her the whole story about Iris. Her eyes got wider and wider as I described the 3 months of chaos. When I finished, she said she was amazed I survived. I would have lost my mind. Having someone new understand helped me process it. 6 months later, Iris messaged me on social media. Her family was doing well, everyone stable, her parents working, brothers getting their lives together. She wrote that she'd learned a lot about communication and honesty. She understood now that lying was wrong, that it damaged our friendship beyond repair. The message was thoughtful, genuine, not defensive. I read it twice. I wrote back that I was glad her family was doing better, and I appreciated her taking responsibility. Brief, polite, maintaining those healthy boundaries. We exchanged a few more messages, casual updates. The friendship was gone, but we could be civil. I hosted a small dinner party about 4 months into my one-bedroom apartment. 3 close friends who'd supported me. I cleaned, cooked, set my little dining table. When they arrived, they commented on how different the space felt. "Calm and welcoming," one said. "Like you finally created a real home." We ate, talked about normal life. Nothing dramatic. My friend Sarah noted how relaxed I seemed. "You look genuinely happy now," another agreed. They were right. This place was truly mine. Nobody taking over my kitchen, sleeping in my living room, eating my food. I felt proud. 2 weeks later, a notification, money deposited. From Iris, the final $200. The full $800 she owed me. I stared at my phone. Part of me hadn't believed she'd follow through. I typed a brief thank you, acknowledging she'd kept her word. It felt like closing a chapter. She responded, glad to finish, hoped I was doing well. A few polite sentences, then the conversation ended. I looked at my bank account, feeling a sense of closure. Now, I find myself thinking about the experience more deeply. I learned important lessons. Before Iris, I would have kept being nice, accommodating, letting people walk all over me. The conflict taught me that setting clear boundaries from the start isn't mean. It's necessary. I should have told Iris no, or been honest about my concerns. Guilt and sympathy can't override my own needs. Her family was struggling, yes, but I didn't have to sacrifice my home to fix their problems. The conflict was exhausting, relationships damaged. But I came out stronger, more confident. I knew now I could handle difficult situations, wouldn't let people manipulate me. It changed how I approached every relationship. A year after everything ended, I'm thriving in my one bedroom, promotion at work, stronger friends, a good dating life. I occasionally wonder about Iris and her family, hope they found stable housing. But mostly, I don't think about them much anymore. That chapter is closed. I'm at peace with how it ended, even though it was messy. Sometimes winning means accepting messy outcomes, permanent changes. Protecting your well-being isn't selfish. You can't sacrifice yourself to save everyone. Standing up for yourself might make you the bad guy in someone else's story, but it doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. I'm genuinely happy now, living on my own terms. My apartment is my sanctuary, my space, my rules. Nobody can change that or invade it again. I built a life I'm proud of, and that truly feels like the real victory.so. Tell me, what would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had a roommate nightmare like this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear what you think.